Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We are asking that you please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Once the presentation has ended, we will hold a Q&A. If you have further questions after the webinar has ended, please feel free to email me, and I will forward them to the appropriate person that can answer them. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be archived on CAVE's website under Professional Development. And now I'd like to introduce Patrice McCarthy, CAVE's Executive Director and General Counsel.
It's a pleasure that we are able to bring you this webinar today. Obviously, given the over 200 participants that have registered, this is a topic of great interest, and we're very appreciative to our colleagues at the State Department of Education for putting this together for us. So without further ado, because I know they have a lot of great content and are eager to answer your questions as well, I'm going to turn it over to Irene Parisi. Irene.
Thank you so much, Patrice, for that welcome, and I'm excited that so many people are interested in this topic today. I am Irene Parisi, the Chief Academic Officer for the State Department of Education, and certainly, as you can see here, the sky has not been the limit for the work that we are doing and this year and beyond. So again, excited that you're here with us. Next slide, we'll share why we're here. So we want to be able to provide the purpose and objectives with this panel. I will be introducing the panel participants. We want to provide you with background and information of the Right to Read Act, and then, as we shared already, have time for questions and answers. Next slide. So our purpose and objectives for today is to certainly deepen our understanding of Public Act 21-2, as referred to here as the Right to Read Act, and what the legislative expectations are for local and regional boards of education. We want to also deepen our understanding of the current Connecticut Grade 3 reading achievement and understand the role and responsibilities not only of the State Department of Education and the established Center of Literacy Research and Reading Success, but those roles and responsibilities of our colleagues in the field and our local boards and regional boards of education. Next slide. So we've assembled a great panel here for you today to achieve those objectives. As you can see here, State Senator Patricia Billy Miller, who has been a proponent of this bill from the very beginning for many years, unfortunately is not able to join us today, as she is with her colleagues over the tragic loss of State Representative Williams, who represents Middletown, but did want to recognize her and her work and her partnership. We do have Stephen Hernandez with us, Attorney Stephen Hernandez, Executive Director of the Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. Commissioner Russell Tucker will be joining us from the Connecticut State Department of Education. Our colleague Ajit Gopalakrishnan, our Chief Performance Officer from the State Department, will be with us, as well as Dr. Melissa Hickey, our Director of the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success. And we are fortunate last minute to have Amy Dowell join us, our Executive Director of Education Reform Now, CT. I think I'm going to now turn it over to our friend and colleague, Stephen Hernandez.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for hosting this conversation. You know, in a lot of ways, this is a conversation, the question of literacy attainment is one that we've been having for many years in the state of Connecticut. As you will recall, those of you on the call, I'm sure will recall, these conversations really came to their moment back during Ed Reform, as we called it, now many years ago. And we remember that Ed Reform was really the time when the fact that we understood, the research told us, 98% of students are able to learn to read. 98% of children are able to learn to read. And yet what we were seeing across the state of Connecticut was that children were not reading at grade level. In some of our districts, the triangle was on its head in terms of how many children weren't reading at grade level. And even in our higher performing performing and highest performing districts, the numbers did not match the science when it came to attainability of literacy skills, those critical skills, those brain skills that are needed to read. So over the years, we have worked very closely, as you said, with leaders of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus and now others, nonpartisan across both chambers in the state of Connecticut, together with our executive branch, our State Department of Ed, and our researchers and thoughtful people on the ground to continue to bring to scale access to literacy across the state. And the most recent iteration of that work has been our Right to Read Act, which is Public Act 21-2. As you see, some of the major elements of the Right to Read Act are here, and they have been unfolding in front of us over the last few months. We understood the science. Students who are not reading by the end of third grade really are not reading to learn thereafter, and then all of the pipelines that we are so unfortunately used to take effect. In those places where children, where literacy, science and research-based literacy opportunities are not available, but parents have resources, parents themselves are having to flip the bill for what should be readily available for our children in those schools. Our parents have been telling us that there's tutoring that is happening. There's all sorts of ways in which parents are making it work. And that in and of itself is part of the untold story of why this is so important. And if schools and districts were to incorporate the science of reading into teaching and learning, then they provide a foundational, an essential foundational function for each student to achieve. This is part of our multi-generational success strategy. It's part of a school to success strategy that our state is committed to. And we're excited to be able to talk about this Right to Read Act and how it continues to evolve, and we will continue to build on it as we move forward.
Thank you, Stephen. The commissioner will be here to talk to everyone. And what I would like to say here is that, and when she does come, I will introduce her as well. So the legislation charged the State Department of Education with establishing the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success. And here you'll see the why, which we'll talk about later in the panel presentation. About every Connecticut student has the right to read at or above grade level by the end of third grade. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Ajit. Ajit, would you mind doing the next few slides, please, on the data?
Sure, Melissa, thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. My purpose here is to just sort of give a sense from the academic achievement information that we have from our Smarter Balanced assessments in terms of what profile our students are presenting in third grade, but also beyond third grade, so that we could see what happens to students who don't attain proficiency in third grade. But let's start with third grade achievement. We don't really have statewide measures prior to third grade, so third grade is really our first sort of universal assessment, if you will. And in the English language arts assessment on the Smarter Balanced, what we see is that prior to the pandemic, about 54% of Connecticut public school students were proficient. So, so what does that translate to? It translates to about 17,000 students in our public schools who are not reading at the proficient or above level. And what do we mean by proficient? In Smarter Balance, there are 4 levels. So when we say we're not proficient, we're saying that they were performing in levels 1 or 2, not in level 3 or 4, as we would expect, at least level 3. So the 17,000 students were performing in levels 1 or 2. And after the pandemic, so in the most recent year, 21-22, the proficiency rate actually declined to 47%, up from 54%. And now, as a result, we now have 19,000 students who are not proficient in ELA in grade 3. And just to sort of reiterate this point too, this is not a fixed number, right? This is an annual number. So annually about 17,000 students, and now it's 19,000. Hopefully we're on our path to recovery, and hopefully these numbers do come down. But as it stands now, it's 19,000 students, and that's an annual kind of rate at which we see. Could we go to the next slide, please, Melissa? And so who are these 19,000 students? And I think, Stephen, you talked about students in, in sort of high need districts, if you will, but also in wealthier districts. So let's look at who are these students, these 19,000 students who are not proficient in grade 3. Over 11,600 of those students are in our 36 alliance districts. So yes, 11,600 of the 19,000 students are in our 36 alliance districts. And within those 11,000 students, about 5,000 of those students are students with disabilities or English learners. But the remaining over 6,600 students are identified as neither English learners or students with disabilities. And why do we break it out this way? We're sort of trying to say, there are, if you're a student with a disability, it could be a wide range of disabilities that are, and when we say students with disabilities, also to clarify, we're talking about students who have an IEP and are receiving special education services. So they have a documented disability. Doesn't mean they can't learn how to read, obviously. We're just trying to sort of paint the picture of the profile of these students. So when we look at those students with disabilities or English learners, about 5,000, but there are 6,600 students in that Alliance District 11,600 group who are not identified as students with disabilities or English learners, who are also not proficient in grade 3. So that's the 11,600. Then we get to the other students, around 7,200 odd students are in non-alliance districts. And again, you see the break there, 2,700 students with disabilities or English learners, while over 4,500 are identified as neither students with disabilities or English learners. Again, these are annual numbers. Just remember, like, these types of numbers of students sort of come up in our systems, through our systems every year. So bottom line, what we see here is thousands of students in grade 3, regardless of disability, English language proficiency, or the district they're in, annually do not achieve minimal proficiency. And minimal proficiency is that level 3. And again, this is a pattern that existed prior to the pandemic and really has been exacerbated by the pandemic based on the numbers that you see here. Could we go to the next slide, please, Melissa? So that was kind of an annual sort of snapshot view of who's in grade 3, or what's the picture in grade 3. But now let's look at what happens to students over time based on how they do in grade 3. So I've got 2 more slides and then I'll be done. So this is not a lot of data here, but just to sort of paint the picture here. So for this purpose, we're looking over time. So this is a matched student analysis. So what that means is we're looking at students in grade 3 in 2015-16, and then looking at the same students in grade 6 in 2018-19. So it's a matched set of students. And in order for us to do this, we had to go pre-pandemic because we needed that longer time frame, and we don't really have that. We could look at during the pandemic time frame, but we were sort of trying to get a clean look even before the impact of the pandemic. And what you see here, the left-hand side of charts represents students who are not special education or English learners, and the right side represents those who are identified as special education or English learners. And what we generally see here is the distribution of percent of students in those 4 levels in grade 3 and in grade 6 is very similar. And if you look at level 1 and 2 for students who are not special education on the left-hand side, you see that 12 and little over 12% were in level 1 in grade 3, and a little, about 11% in level 1, and about 22% in level 2. There's a little bit of a shift in level 3 and 4, but when you look at the level 1 and 2, basically the distributions look similar. And if you flip to the right side, it's the same sort of situation. The distributions look reasonably similar in terms of percentage of students at each of those levels of performance. And again, on the right side, we're looking at students who are special education or English learners, and you can see, in grade 3, over 50% of the students were in level 1, and that comes down a little bit to 46%, really 3 years later. So that's kind of the distribution of performance of those math students. Let's go to the next slide, Melissa. And then we took another look here. And what we did here is we looked at those same matched students. We looked at where they started in grade 3. and that's the first column, which shows whether they were in level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4. And then we said, what percentage of those students are still below proficiency in grade 6? So it's looking at the same kid in grade 3 and looking at grade 6. And so I'll read this, I'll sort of explain this here. Of the students who were in level 1 in grade 3, if they were not special education or English learners, 86% of them were still not proficient in grade 6. And that's about 2,900 students. And then if you go to the right-hand side, if they were special education or English learners, Melissa, could we get back to the 93% of them were still below proficient, not at level 3 or 4, still below level 3. And you could see, now you could see the subsequent charts. If they were in level 2, 59% were still in levels 1 or 2 in grade 6. And if they were special education or English learner, it was over 70% were still below proficiency. You'll notice a little bit of sort of regression happening. Students who are minimally proficient, if you will, in grade 3, you'll notice that 27% of them are not proficient when you get to grade 6. So there's a little bit of backward sliding that's happening. And the same you see for special education or English learners. And this goes back to some of the reason why we're doing this work is to, as the type of reading, the complexity of reading increases in those grades, the importance of those foundational skills really becomes essential. And I think you're seeing some of that play out here. It's only when you get to students who are, at the highest level, level 4, is where you see the least bit of progression. So if they were in level 4 in grade 3, then 5% of students are below proficient in grade 6, so a much smaller percentage. But in that level 2 and 3 bucket, you see a lot of that back and forth type pattern happening here. So in summary, what you see is a majority of students, if they were below proficiency in grade 3, they remain below proficiency in grade 6 ELA. And the students who are minimally proficient, that level 3 students in grade 3, actually end up below proficiency in grade 6. And this is a pattern that's holding true whether students are identified as special education or English learner or they're not identified as such.
All right, thank you so much, Ajit.
Welcome.
And thank you also to Patrice and Will Marie for hosting this event today and partnering with us. So as Stephen shared with some of the science and the evidence, that the data are very clear that 98% of students can read, right? So this really did, as we heard, motivate the legislators to create this legislation and entrust the State Department of Education to establish the center. So what I want to share now are the center's why, how, and the what. These were co-created with the council. Per the legislation, we also have a council, and the council supports and helps to guide the center. So thank you so much to so many of our council members. Many of you I know are familiar with Simon Sinek's work and that focus on the why. And once again, here you can see the how, the why, and the what of the center. I'll quote Executive Director Rabinowitz, who in our council meetings is always saying that this work cannot be accomplished alone, how partners are so important in the work. So once again, just thank you to the appointed Reading Leadership Implementation Council. Stephen is also a member, so thank you. And the many stakeholders across Connecticut who have provided their time, volunteered their time, shared ideas, and really partnered in support of these initiatives. So I'm going to go to the next slide that shares some of the initiatives. This is just a summary. It's not all inclusive of the legislated mandate. And then Irene and I will delve a little deeper into the assessment and curriculum models or program pieces of the legislation. But you can see, as you can see here, the first mandate was to establish a center at the State Department of Education. Our Commissioner, Russell Tucker, did that immediately, putting that into place. The next is to review and approve the reading curriculum models or programs. This was completed in the spring and the fall of the school year. Also, the assessments, those were earmarked and then sent to the Board of Education to be approved. We have been providing support to districts in a variety of ways: coaching, leadership training, professional development. We have a pilot family engagement with some of the alliance districts, and also providing technical assistance, as you can see per the legislation. We've engaged the literacy coaches and they've been starting the work. So the green checks mean that that has been accomplished. The yellow, we continue to work on that. But coaches have been working in various alliance districts to support them with this very important literacy work. The council, we worked on a statewide reading plan as well as an intervention strategy, and that is being completed as we speak so that we can share that with the public and eventually post to our website. The next two cannot yet be done until all of the districts are set with the reading curricula and programs. We are serving as a collaborative center. We've started meeting with our higher education partners, and we have another meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. Also making available the programs and the curriculum models that were accepted that found as meet expectations, and we'll continue our partnership with them. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Irene to go a little deeper into the assessment piece. Irene?
Thank you, Melissa. And before we do, though, I want to give a chance and invite Amy Dowell to maybe speak, because she was part of the conversations around the legislation. And since we're kind of at like that natural next step, so Amy, I was wondering if you'd want to say a few words regarding the legislation and that movement.
Sure. So I am really honored to be here kind of as a proxy for Senator Miller. Senator Miller was a brilliant negotiator and planner of this legislation, and I really want to give her due. This was built upon a pilot that started almost a dozen years ago with a variety of partners, including the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus and UConn-NEAG School of Education. Stephen has been a longtime partner in this work. So I really came to it quite late. I would say probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, I started to dig a little deeper on a personal note, just because I had a child who was struggling to learn to read. And I ran an education organization that did advocacy work, and I was scratching my head, really trying to understand what was going on and how I could help my own child, and started to learn a lot about not only what was going on here in Connecticut and districts, but also what other states had done. And we are an advocacy organization. We did a tremendous amount of advocacy work. If you've seen the Right to Read materials or website, that was our organization launching those, and pulled together an external group of advisors, including a lot of superintendents. I actually consulted quite often with my own school board members in my own community. And I think what's important to say about this legislation is that we tried our very best, and there are so many stakeholders that are involved in this work, and so many layers of thought leaders that participated in this process. I just want to be clear that we tried to do this in a really inclusive, data-driven, research-driven way, where we were bringing in a lot of voices and a lot of expert advice. And I think what we've come up with is a real partnership with the State Department of Education. And I see the commissioner has now joined, and I just want to, on behalf of Pat as well, just say thank you to the leaders on this call who have done an incredible job kind of putting into practice the vision that so many people participated in creating.
Thank you, Amy, for sharing. And yes, I would like to recognize that Commissioner Russell Tucker has joined us. So Commissioner, we can give you the floor for a moment if you would like to share a few words. She may be having technical difficulties, so maybe behind the scenes, she and Melissa can just check in, but certainly, Commissioner, open your mic when you can and share with us. So assessments, yes, this is an opportunity to share 2 requirements of the legislation for local and regional boards of education. The first bullet listed here requires boards to use the Connecticut State Department of Education approved K-3 screening reading assessments to identify students that are reading below proficiency. And this is an expectation that has been in place for some time. And the expectation now is connected to the work of the center. The second bullet highlights the requirement of boards with their district leaders to choose and implement an approved pre-K to 3 core comprehensive reading curricula and/or program. And boards and district leaders have the opportunity to demonstrate to the commissioner, as listed here, that if there are insufficient resources, they can certainly request an extension. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that and what that means. And also boards and district leaders may also apply for a waiver to implement a curriculum or a program other than those that have been approved by the center. But again, we'll give more detail to that. And I will say that all details of those 2 steps and everything related to the open review has been communicated. There's a dedicated website to that information. And I believe it was on one of the previous slides. So that superintendents have that communication. It's made available on that center website. And we know that through the Superintendent Digest, the commissioner shares any updates related to all things remaining related to the center. Listed here are the approved reading assessments for K through 3 screening for reading proficiency. All assessments submitted by districts went through a rigorous review process to ensure that each assessment has demonstrated utility in predicting that reading acquisition, has the ability to track individual children's growth, the development in critical reading skills over time, and utility in allowing educators to truly reliably determine the extent to which a student is making progress toward a long-term goal for reading. The purpose of the research-based universal screening assessments for reading is to identify students in kindergarten to grade 3 who are below proficiency in reading and to assist in the identification, in whole or in part, students at risk for dyslexia or other reading-related learning disabilities. As linked on this slide, I suggest that using volume 1 of an FAQ that we've created for the grade 3 K through 3 universal screening reading assessment. That document is intended to answer the many questions that are out there presented from the field. So really, we appreciate all of the questions we received in advance because you can be seen in that Q&A, that FAQ that's provided. It really can serve as a tremendous resource to board members as well as district leaders when you are engaging in those assessment conversations. Next slide. Melissa, do you want me to hand it over to you?
Sure, that would be lovely. I'm just checking, were we able to get the commissioner, the audio set? Can she speak?
I'm going to try. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Yes, perfectly.
No, that's great, but I don't want to interrupt your flow, so why don't you keep going, and I can certainly jump back on and talk to folks, but please keep going. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Commissioner. All right, so as Irene explained, the assessment legislation, and interestingly, the assessment legislation comes from 2 pieces of legislation. So we had to look at the 2 pieces of legislation to put those together around the assessments, and it was very much driven by the work of the task force, the dyslexia task force. So moving on now to the approved curriculum models or programs. As Irene mentioned, we do have the link here. By clicking on that, it does go to our dedicated website where we do put updates and documents and guidance, etc. Of note, which Irene also mentioned, is we've had multiple communications with superintendents and local and regional boards of education around the survey. So there are 2 surveys that are currently available. One survey is only to get what is the intent. What are local and regional boards of education intending on doing? So are they intending on adopting one of the approved programs? Are they intending on asking for an extension of 1 year based on resources? Are they intending on applying for a waiver? More recently, the waiver went out, also in a Qualtrics survey format for our local and regional boards of education to look at and then submit documents around the waiver. What I would like to do, and you may have to give me a moment here, I would like to click so you can see some of these, and I just want to make sure that it shows up on the screen when I'm sharing. So colleagues, can you see the website or are you still seeing the PowerPoint? Okay, thank you so much. All right, so here you can see the website, that is the dedicated website that we were discussing. On here is information that is relevant, not only about the process of how these programs were approved, but also, so here you'll see the process, but also information about the waiver. So here in our information, you'll see that we had 16 literacy experts, 16 people in Connecticut who reviewed each of the submissions that came in. There were over 50 submissions that came in May and were individually reviewed at least 2 times. And then those data were used and triangulated with other states. We are not the only state to have an initiative like this. Others do have similar, in which they are choosing curriculum programs or models. One state went with just one. Some make it a mandate for all to include. They don't have a waiver, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So looking at what other states were doing, we wanted to see what other curriculum models or programs were bubbling up as being aligned to the science and the evidence. So we use those data to triangulate, and that's how we came up with the list that you see here. Moving down, you'll see note about the survey. Now that was extended based on feedback from our local and regional boards of education. We were hearing that they needed a little more time to decide what their intent was going to be. So we've extended that to January 13th and also posted all the waiver information here. So we're going to dig a little deeper into that waiver so that you can see. I know there's been many questions about what is a waiver, what does it look like, etc. We have information once again posted to the website, but what I'd also like to do, and if you could give me a moment again, let's see if I can get the waiver. You know, I'm going to have to come back to that, I think. Whoops, apologies. I'll come back so I can show you the waiver and how simple it is to be uploading these documents. While I'm doing that, Irene, would you mind sharing? We've been hearing from the field about wanting to know more about what is the science of reading? How can I find out more about it? So we did put together a playlist of resources. Irene, would you mind sharing those while I get the waiver up and running?
Not at all, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So what we have here, as I'm certain that the slide deck will be shared, this is a curated playlist, or at least it was a curated playlist of additional resources that we've collected and even created that you could either watch, listen to, read. So you can really start wherever the need is and where the interest is. And you can certainly go big and research through all of it. But this is just a short playlist. And I think we have some additional resources possibly listed on the next slide. Yeah. That's more about the professional learning partnerships that we have had that have been longstanding and then part of the future. But we did want to make sure that at the close of this webinar, if you have more questions, you have access to additional resources to, again, continue to deepen our understanding of the science of reading and all of this work that we're committed to. Melissa?
Thank you. It seems like with this WebEx format, I will have to pause then to go online. So I assure everyone I will be showing you the waiver. What I'm going to do now is we can share, as Irene was saying, about our professional learning. Amy Dowell did mention that this work has been going on and ongoing. I've been at the state for 7 years. Prior to coming to the state, I was in the Hartford Public Schools, and we participated in the pilot and of this literacy model. And then coming to the state, it's been interesting to see both sides. We've continued our partnership with UConn, Hill for Literacy and Literacy How. They are amazing literacy experts that have really helped to dive deep into opportunity and alliance districts and help provide these structures that evidence and research show are so important to have in districts, such as professional learning, family engagement, having structures such as teams at both the district and the school level to drive the literacy work, looking at assessment data, science-based assessment data to drive the instruction that's occurring, structures like programs, curriculum models, and assessment. So we also started a partnership when I came on board called ReadCon. ReadCon originally was with LearnZillion and PCG, Public Consulting Group. This was both in person and online. When the pandemic hit, we did shift to online and continued it with PCG online. These are school-based teams where K-3 educators and administrators are learning about the science of reading. And then we have the Science of Reading Masterclass. And I'm wondering, Commissioner, would you like to add around your brilliant idea of the masterclass?
So thank you, Melissa. And let me just take a moment here. And I know you're all in listening mode and you probably have lots of questions, so I want to make sure we get to that. But before I jump in, just to talk specifically about the masterclass, I want to appreciate and thank you, Patrice, for facilitating getting folks together today. Amy, Stephen, thank you so much. I know Senator Miller wanted to be here, but unfortunately, because of everything that has happened, is not here with us today. And certainly to the team, thank you. And to all of you, our board members and our superintendents, you're here because this is so very important and so very important that we're working together. So I just really want to appreciate you on a cloudy Friday to be sharing this time with us, and so we can answer your questions, which is really important. And, you know, back to the issue of investing in the master class with our partners, and with, I believe Fran may be listening here, with the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents was so important. And I'll tell you our why, and I think it is a collective why. Recognizing the department truly believes that literacy, reading, writing, right, these are all fundamental, but think about the role of reading. I call it personally, it's the gateway to students being able to access their entire educational career, right? And so, you know, reading by third grade is so important because they need to learn to read so they can read to learn. Nothing that I'm saying that you don't know, but recognizing, I believe you've already heard our data, right? We really try to be data driven and recognizing that we cannot afford to have students not reading proficiently by the end of third grade in our state. And I know you feel that way about it. It really is out of that, looking at our data, we know that we have legislation, but also saying what else can we do to make sure that the tools are available to be utilized And that really gave rise to the master class, working with CAPS and doing this awesome professional development for administrators, understanding the science of reading. And I know Irene or Melissa can talk more just a little bit about the numbers that we're touching and reaching with the cohorts that we have going. But it was important for us, as we have resources in the state, to invest in this. And I think we have a $6 million investment. And we're doing this and sharing and evaluating to make sure that we can also talk to our legislature. You know, if this is something we're saying works and is necessary, that they can also step in to provide funding to support. So, but it goes to that collective why, and I know you feel the very same way as we do here. And so from our leadership, wanting to make sure that we're supporting this work and working together on this, it is critical. And all our students, you know, the 19,000 that we're missing, or the 17,000, but frankly, the 513,614 students in our state deserve for all of us to be working together to make sure that they can access their educational career. And this is why we're here together. And thank you for being there. And we'll be working together on this. Thank you, Melissa. I know I said a little bit more than just the master class, but I wanted to take this chance just to be in that room and just value the partnership in getting to this point and moving forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Just to check, can everyone see the waiver on the screen? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, so this is the waiver that we've been talking about. This was a link that was sent to superintendents, as Irene mentioned. And I know there's a lot of interest in what does the waiver look like. Once again, there are 3 different options. One, districts can say on that intent survey, right, that they are intending on having a program in place for implementation July 1, 2023. They can ask on the other survey of intent, they can ask for an extension of 1 year based on lack of resources, funding, etc. And then also they have the choice of the waiver. This waiver was done in partnership. We so appreciate all the feedback from the superintendent, from Fran Rubinowitz and her continued partnership. So what does this waiver look like? Here there's a drop down where you would pick, and I'll just pick the first one here, where you will pick a district name. Here is where the signature name goes in, and so that I can later delete this, I am just going to do XXX, superintendent. This is my email and a nonsense phone number. Going on here, what the district would then have to do is drop or click files here, click to add files here. So they would have to click and add the document here of a detailed description. This can be a compendium of documents, but demonstrating how their current curriculum model or program is evidence-based and scientifically based, and how it's focused on competency. There was a question that came to us prior to the webinar. How does the state know that it's evidence-based and science-based? And that is another document that is online where we use the work of other states that have been doing this and looking through the evidence-based lens of what's important to be included in each program. And that has been our indicator across. So that was used once again in spring and fall when we were reviewing programs. So districts would drop the files here or the document here. I think I have to just put one in here. Oh, that's lovely. You can see everything. Put that over. I'm just going to add a document here. It has been added. And then go to the next. The next then is the reading template. We do have that posted online as well. The data that occurred during the pandemic is not included in the document that is posted online. That was another question we got ahead of time. Ajit, did you want to add something? I see your, okay. So here, once again, you would simply drop the file. I'm going to drop one here. And move on here. Now, using the data from the district, the other legislative requirement for the waiver is that there is a detailed explanation of the strategy. What strategy will districts be embarking upon to ensure that everyone is reading by the end of the grade level. So how are they supporting their students? What is the strategy? Really looking at those achievement gaps. And once again, they can be providing any kind of detailed explanation, and they drop the file in here. And then that is the waiver. The waiver, and then they would sign here, attesting that it is them and that they are following the student data privacy laws. So that's the waiver, and then it is due at the end of February, and then the State Department of Education will be engaging with partners to review the waivers. Those are the questions that we got ahead of time. I hope that we assisted in understanding or helping you understand a little bit better what has been going on at the state level around the data, why the legislation, as well as what is the function of the center, what is the purpose, and what have they been doing. Now, Will Marie, I know you said you were collecting questions. Are there questions that you would like to share?
So we would like to open up the questions section of the webinar. So if you have questions, please post them into the question box and I will read them along as they come in.
I do have just one underscore, Melissa, because I think the way that you described the waiver is, you were very precise, and the legislature was very precise in the waiver possibility, the waiver opportunity, in that the waiver is not an opportunity to not do the work because of the levels of literacy attainment in your district. In other words, if 95% of the children in your district, 90% of the children of your district are reading at grade level, that means that 10%, 8% of the children of your district are not. So the question is, how are you addressing, what are the demographics, and what are the science and research-based ways in which you are delivering that intentional opportunity for those children? And by the way, what we've shown is that not only is there the science of reading, which is critical, but also the implementation of the structure as well. Implementation and leadership is critical here, which is why the department is so keen on ensuring that implementation science training is something that's available to districts as well. We want to make sure that in those situations where you do have those upticks of children who may be on the dyslexia spectrum, or children who may be coming in as English language learners, find themselves in a district that have the structure in place necessary so that they can learn to read.
Okay. So the questions are coming in now, rapid fire. Let's see, the first question is, will you be reviewing the data template that was provided as part of the waiver process?
Yes, for legislation, that is part of the waiver process. So it was those elements that I was showing there, the documentation around the data. And just so people know too, we were aware that many of the districts have not yet been using one of the newly approved assessments that are going into place July 1, 2023. So to assist districts with that flexibility, we are encouraging you to utilize the data that you have been collecting and putting it into that format so that you can, once again, it's really being done to assist districts in really looking closely at what programs, what curricula, what are our data saying about teaching and learning? Do we need to be providing more professional learning around evidence-based reading practices? Do we need to be shifting the programs and curricula in place so that all of our learners are reaching grade level by the end of that grade level? So by doing this waiver process, it can be very helpful to districts to really be looking at, once again, what do we currently have in place? what are our student data saying, and what are things that we could be doing to increase all learners' knowledge? And then I just want to piggyback on what Stephen was saying. He brought up a really good point oftentimes. But one time during the council meeting, he said the waiver process is also so that if there was not a curriculum model or program that was submitted in May for review, this gives us another time to look to see if there are other things out there that we could be adding to the list of approved that meet expectations in the areas of scientifically based, evidence-based literacy practices.
I'll just jump in also just to add, and just going back to this specific question about that data point. When we talk about all, we're saying all means all. So it allows the data to be disaggregated by your different student groups, so that, you may be finding success, or one student group may be finding success and another one not. It's for all of us to step back and say, okay, so why not? And what do we need to do for some interventions here? So I believe I like to look at it as a way to really take a look at our data at each district level to find out what's happening. So we can, when we talk about all finding success, we're truly talking about all.
Thank you. The next question is, okay, when can we expect the waiver decisions to be released?
I'm sorry, the waiver what? I couldn't hear the word.
The waiver decisions to be released.
Oh, decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So just like with the process that we followed in May, we're going to have to do a review process of each and every waiver application that comes in. With this process, as the commissioner has stated many times, that the reviewers may have questions, so it may become more of a back and forth than just this is what you've provided to us to review, therefore that's all we're going to be looking at. So right now, we really can't assign a date because we want to make sure we're doing each and every review in a very meticulous way.
Okay, thank you. So next question, we got a quote for 1.7 million to adopt the ARC core program. We only have 850 students in K through 5. How will districts truly support the cost?
So I do want to just add to my other answer, I'm sorry. Just so everyone knows, we are still finalizing the timeline on the waiver, but we do want to ensure that we're getting information by that, prior to that July 1 deadline. So about costs, we were very fortunate. The Black and Puerto Rican Caucus were able to donate or devote some of the ARPA funding from the governor's office, from the state level, to the Connecticut State Department of Education to support districts, local and regional boards of education, to support the legislation around the center. It is 25 million over the next 2 years, so approximately 12.5 each year. And the intent of those monies are to support all of the legislative initiatives. So not only, as we showed with the Alliance districts, supporting them with the coaching and with the professional learning, but also supporting districts who have shown that they have academic, I'm sorry, I'm struggling on the word right now for ARPA. So we have the ARPA funds, which are a little different than the ARP ESSER funds, which I know you all are very familiar with the ARP ESSER funds. The ARPA funds have a little bit different of a flavor and parameters around it. So with the ARPA funds, we need to be showing that children did have academic difficulties during the pandemic. And in this way, we can be supporting the various districts. Our intent is to have some sort of a grant available so that we can do that to assist districts with the need of purchasing materials, etc. So I hope that helps.
And I'll also add, to the extent, and I don't know the details there, that could be a one-time investment. That is also something for districts, and I know fully well that you're not all resourced the same with the ESSER funding, but I know districts are also looking at some of their own ESSER dollars as well, that this may be this one-time purchase. Not that you don't have to go beyond that, but I'm just saying it could very well be an area to look. And as I said, I know folks are resourced differently across the state there, but I know some districts are looking to those funds as well to help to support what it is that they need to purchase.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Commissioner. You know, so under Commissioner Russell Tucker, we've talked so much about braiding of funds and really looking toward all of the funding that's coming to the district that is federal and that is state and that is local, and making decisions around how should we be spending these monies, where should they be going, where can they be going, and how can we braid these so that they can be supporting one another. Whoops.
So I have another question here. Will the center be sharing a rubrics or documentation for each of the approved reading programs with details on how or why the center found that the programs meet legislative requirements?
We do have those documents that were utilized during the process, and if you're interested, please email me and I can share that information with you.
Okay, next question. How long after submission will the review process take before districts are informed? Oh, I'm sorry, I think you've covered that. If a district's waiver is not accepted, what will be the next steps?
So with the waiver process, once again, it is going to be this back and forth. If there are questions on part of the reviewers, if at the end it is established that it does not meet expectations, then the district they may apply for the 1-year extension, in which they have a year to now explore the approved programs. They can adopt a program that was meeting expectations right away if they so choose. But once again, those would be the options available to them because now they would have to be looking into what approved program and or curriculum model would they be utilizing.
So, two-part question. What proof do we have in districts that are using these programs that they work? And why do districts that are already performing well have to adopt a new curriculum if they are already successful?
Sure. So I think, as the commissioner said, this legislation, well, she didn't say it exactly like this. Let me start first by saying this legislation, I feel, has really encouraged districts to look very deeply at what they're currently doing. And in this process, it is a learning process. So I think it's up to districts to really look at their data and say, what does success mean? As Stephen Hernandez said, you know, if we have 90% of our students who are at grade level, still means that we have 10% who are not. And as the commissioner said, all means all. And I certainly don't mean to be hogging these questions. If there's any of my colleagues who'd like to jump on, Stephen, Amy, you know, please feel free. And I think I forgot, perhaps, was there 2 parts to that question? Amy, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to mention one quick thing, because I do think, Will Marie, would you be able to share my screen for just a second?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Is this Amy speaking? I'm sorry, I have another screen open.
Sorry.
Okay.
Is it up?
Okay. I've made you a presenter, so you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, great. Is it working? Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
How do I do that? Sorry about this, guys. Is there something? Anyway, well, is there something on the top of the screen that says share my screen? I'm not seeing it.
So there should be, let's see. For me, it's different because I have the organizer screen.
It
If you
should
click
say
on,
that
if you click
when
on
you look,
webcams,
yeah, thank you.
Oh, on the right side, okay.
It should have a drop down. So if you click on the triangle that's pointing at webcam, when you
Yeah.
click on it, drops down and then it says either stop sharing or.
Okay. Anyway, I don't want to get too complicated and I'm not 100% sure how to do this, but what I wanted to show you is a material that came home with my child. I feel like, we're talking a lot about, 98% or 40% or things like that. But I think what's important to understand about why all districts and why it's important to think about this for all districts, including very high performing districts or very well resourced districts, is that my child came home with a lot of materials from school, particularly during the pandemic, and one of them says good habits for solving hard words. And the first recommendation for him to practice was to check the picture. And I think what we really need to recognize is that he was being pulled out for tiered support, with an OG trained reading interventionist who was phenomenally great, but he was also going back to a classroom that was encouraging him to look at pictures and use a balanced literacy approach that was not research based. And for a 7-year-old brain, that is not only confusing, but it's an inconsistent approach across the board in terms of instruction. So what this legislation was aiming for, and I think why it's important across the board to recognize, is that when we don't have the same expectations that everything is research-based across the board in all school districts, you're still reaching students and leaving students behind who are then not being offered the best practice approaches. And it's not about a lack of good intentions, it's just about the fact that research is pretty settled in terms of why, and even high performing districts have room for improvement in terms of this work. Oh, I'm sorry, say what Orton Gillingham is. Orton Gillingham is a phonics-based approach to learning to read. And it's the old school way that many of us on this learn to read, by sounding it out. I mean, for the layman here, for the folks on this call who maybe do not have a PhD in the cognitive science of teaching. So I just want to make sure that we are communicating with school board members that perhaps don't have a deep professional background in reading instruction.
All right, thank you, Amy. Well, Marie, were there other questions?
Oh, there are many questions.
Okay.
The next question is, with such a large number of students who are not proficient are in alliance districts, are alliance districts allowed to waiver out of this?
That's a great question. That's a really good question, if I may.
Yeah.
Early on, when we realized what the numbers were in the alliance districts, and probably rightfully so, because we were in a budget crisis in those days, we understood that the cost for children in alliance districts to receive not only the structured support that they needed, but for the districts to really realign themselves around the science of reading, was going to be in the multiple millions. And what was said at the time is, we just can't afford it. But that point in time analysis of cost, what we can afford, fails to consider the long-term consequences of entire generations of children's families and communities that are not accessing the right to read, so that then they have a chance at success in life. And in fact, the question of whether there is an ability to waive out because the problem is just so big is actually best answered by the previous question, which is, it's going to cost us a lot of money. How can we find the resources? That's the question. and you turn to your legislators, you turn to the federal government, you turn to the agencies, you turn to your communities because of how important it is for children to learn to read and to access this critical skill set. So the waiver was written very intentionally so that it's not a way out of the requirement because it is either too expensive or too onerous because 90% of our children can read. The waiver was written so that every child has the opportunity to read regardless of how expensive it is, and that mirror should be turned directly to the people who are in charge of the purse.
And let me just add as well, and thank you for that point, because I wanted to reiterate as well that you're not waiving out of, and the whole reason for the review process that Melissa talked about is really saying the alternative, right, is research-based and science-based, and that's why it's going to be so important that we spend the time to take a look at the compendium, right, if you're not doing that, of what you're sending in, because you're going to say, or you're saying, really, the process is to say, you know what we're doing is research-based, scientifically based, and we're going to tell you why we know it is. And so that is the whole process of not waiving out of, right, but using an equally, I would say, viable, I would use the word alternative, right, and that is what the process is. And I just go back to the other, and I know this is a new path that a lot of us are kind of leaning in on. And I'll go back to, as I challenge my agency and all of us, what does success really look like, right? And are we okay to say, well, maybe we're at 86%, which I think is the highest, the district with the highest, right, percentage of students who are proficient, 86%. And we're doing it here at the state agency, and I encourage all of us to ask, is that success? You know, does that success? And if the answer is yes, are we okay to say the other group of students here, the 14%, whatever, it's okay that they don't meet success? And I believe all of us would have a resounding no when we think about, I think it was President Obama at one point that said, if we talk about the greatest anti-poverty program is a world-class education. All right, and that's what we're all committed to working on together. And the resources, believe me, I'll be the champion, right? If we're moving forward and we don't have the resources to shake every tree that there is and to talk to our legislators, and I'm sure that the folks here would do just that. I know Patrice goes down and she's down there, and I know Fran is on the call and the CAPS do, and you all have your own individual voices and power to do that. And so it's like, how do we do this going forward? But I just really wanted to reiterate the waiving piece is not doing something different here, but you know that is not equally meeting the requirements of being research-based and science-based, and which is one of the reasons, again, we're invested in the master class so that administrators and groups of folks across districts can also understand what this all means and to work together. And you know, I don't make Zoom or virtual policies, but one of the things I know we've talked about here is how do we make sure that as board members that you also have access to some of this information as well for your own learning and your own knowledge to support the district, to support your superintendent in doing this work. But it is, I've challenged all of us to think about, for not just literacy, what does success really look like? And I would make the case that if we have any numbers of our students not meeting success, you know, not getting to the goal or the outcome, then we can't claim success. And we should continue to challenge ourselves to be able to do more.
Okay. So the next question, let's see. We are not seeking a waiver. We are seeking the financial hardship extension that was referenced before. What is the process for extension submission? Will the financial hardship extension request process require a data justification such as student achievement or otherwise?
So once again, there are three options, or there are three that the legislation put forward. One, the intent is for all districts to implement by July 1, 2023, an approved meet expectations curriculum model or program. Two, if districts, local and regional boards of education, feel that they have a need, a lack of resources, funding, they can apply for an extension. Right now, the only way that we're having people indicate that they are interested in an extension is through the survey. So at this point, as we develop next steps, the only place for people to share that information with us that you're intending on moving forward with this 1-year extension, by at the end of that year, you will have picked or chosen one of the approved need expectations, curriculum models, or programs. So that's the only place at this point. And the only thing you'd have to do is to check off the box in the first survey that I was talking about that's due July 13th, the intent.
Okay. Next question. What if a district was interested in the school-wide program that is on the maybe list? What would a district have to do to get approval for this program?
The waiver. That's like probably my simplest answer so far.
Okay, let's see. Next question. Are the universal screeners meant to be done in their entirety? Some of them specifically list the RAN portion only. Is the intention then to make sure that the screening tools include RAN? Will other assessments be able to submit to be considered?
So the way that it's important to look at the document, the menu, you'll see the general outcome measures on the left-hand side and the assessment type is at the top. So what we've tried to do is communicate that this assessment meets all of these general outcome measures or maybe one. So the RAN meets one of the outcome measures. So if you're choosing that, you must choose another assessment in order to realize achievement benchmarks on all of those general outcome measures. So I guess the short answer is yes, it would have to be done in its entirety. But if you're only choosing that RAN, you do need another assessment to ensure you're measuring all of those general outcome measures.
Okay, this is a quick question and answer. Can you send us links to all the websites you shared on the screen and the list of resources to learn about the science of reading? And yes, we can.
Absolutely. I'm sorry.
No, you go right ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, we intend on sending a PDF of this presentation to CABE to then disseminate out to all. So once again, Patrice, thank you so much for your partnership. Will-Marie, thank you so much for all you're doing right now to help with the
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yes, and I realize that we are out of time, but if you can stick around, we can take 2 more questions. Would that be okay? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so we attended the waiver support session offered by EastCon on 12/22. Very helpful, and they provided a template of tables and narrative questions to use as the waiver responses. Has the SCE approved that template shared by EastCon?
I don't think we were aware of that.
Okay.
No.
Okay, let's see. Another question is, in the waiver, there is no place to address our approach to phonological awareness. Where should we include our practice? Let's see.
Well, as I showed today, there are those 3 areas. So what a district might consider doing is in the first, where it's asking, the question was asking about the documentation and your compendium, you could consider putting something there.
Okay. So I do have.
Is the place. I'm sorry, I just want to be sure, Melissa, because that is the place. It's not just a matter of dropping documents in, right? It truly is about, right, it's answering the question, how is
Yes.
this compendium of what it is that you're doing, right, meets scientifically based and meets the criteria. And I think it lists there the elements of the science of reading, right? So
Correct.
that is where you're basically making your case that
Correct.
everything that you're doing in combination or whatever meets that state. So thank you for that question, because I know it quickly, and Melissa was very concise in how you drop things and upload things, but when you really look closely at that first question, that's where you're really making that case, and what you're dropping in are probably, those materials to supplement how you're answering that. Is not that's correct,
Yes.
I believe, Melissa?
Yes, and actually on our website, with one of the links that were embedded and how I was walking you through the website, we do have a document that is guidance on the waiver. And there are questions there that we pose to assist you with really looking at the science and the evidence and how are your pieces coming together to make this whole, as the commissioner is talking about. And when I say drop, I don't mean it just like off the cuff. I'm just trying to make it so that you understand that we're trying to make this as easy as possible for you to be uploading all of your documents, all of your evidence. Please note that the format, the Qualtrics, cannot take individual documents. It really will have to be a zip file of your evidence, as the commissioners stated. So thank you.
Can I read one more?
Yeah,
Okay.
please. It's
Okay,
great
great.
that we have so many people on right now.
Sure. So I mean, I can keep going as long as you guys want to. I acknowledge that we have a lot of questions. We will not be able to get through all of them, but I'm trying to ask as many as we can. So the next question is, can you speak more about the professional development Stephen just discussed that is being provided by the state for districts in implementation of the new curriculum?
So I'm not sure if I interpreted it the same way, so if I'm understanding your question. But what we have done is, as you saw on the one slide, we have 3 sources right now of professional learning. There are also some online modules that are posted as well to our website around the Common Core standards. But the first, which was the Connecticut literacy model, is very much geared at those opportunity districts and assisting them with the lift of assessments and literacy practices and structures. What we've been doing to date has not been focused solely on a program or a curriculum model, but much more at those structures that are evidence-based that can help districts in putting those, like I said, structures in place to really assist with helping students. So as I mentioned before, it is, some are as simple as having that district literacy team in which the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, directors of curriculum, the multilingual language specialist, special education, there are teachers. So you have this district committee or group that is aligned to the strategic plan, to the portrait of the graduate, and really working to have all schools in the district and stakeholders doing this lift together. There are consistent assessments that are evidence-based, scientifically based. There is curricula in place that is aligned, once again, to the science of reading. There's professional learning that's ongoing that is supporting the knowledge and understanding of all educators and helping the reading coaches.
I think I would add, Melissa, specifically to the Science of Reading Masterclass, which is really a proof of concept, if you will. We have over 200 people participating in literacy district-wide teams, as you mentioned, and Stephen had mentioned implementation science, which is a cornerstone of that work because it is program curricula agnostic. It is about the practices at that district leader level and really understanding how to empathize with the people, the community you serve, and then determining fit and feasibility if you have to make those decisions related to now how to bring those programs or model curriculas in that literacy plan that the district is developing. So I think I understood a little bit there, but just to add, the masterclass implementation science is a part of those conversations, that 200 plus group, which again, we're hoping to in some way scale. We will see, we're talking about that, but we're learning from that PD process. Commissioner, I don't know if you want to just share something else related to that.
And just to add it, we are now on cohort 2 that has started up the master class. We made this available, and districts are able to come in and learn more about it and then sign up to be a part of it. We're cautiously optimistic, so those 2 cohorts are moving forward, and we're cautiously optimistic that we'll be adding a 3rd cohort in the near future, because this is really important work for us that we're doing, and so folks can stay tuned for that. But folks are given the opportunity, districts are given the opportunity to explore with us, and then to join the cohort to get this really intensive first class, master class, really professional learning to support the science of reading at the local level. I'm going to need to, the team may be able to stay for a few minutes longer, but I'm going to need to jump off. Can I just take this opportunity again just to thank you, and again, that folks, so 139 folks are still on here. Patrice shows the need, and so I just appreciate, again, Stephen, Amy, and the team here, and you, Patrice, for bringing folks together. And, let's continue to have this dialogue. We much prefer, I can say that as I'm volunteering folks to continue to keep the lines of communication open. We want to answer your questions. We want to make sure it is clear where we are, so we can head there together on behalf of our students, and supporting our educators as well, and not to be lost, that they're also, I'm sure, really needing to be supported so that they can support our students. So again, thank you all so very much for being here, and this is not the end of the conversation. We'll continue to have this conversation. I'm sure, folks, we know we're in a session now, and I'm sure a lot of this conversation will be coming up with the legislature as well. So again, thank you all very much, and thanks, and enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe and be well.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, so I will read one more question and then we'll wrap this up. I'm wondering if perhaps I can share the questions that were asked with the presenters, and maybe we can answer them that way through email, if that's okay. Let's see. How is the State Department ensuring the distribution of ARPA funds is equitable among districts?
Sure. So once again, we are going to be we're in the process of developing some sort of a grant for districts. The metrics have not yet been established, and we will have to get back to you on that. We do want to make sure that we are helping a variety of districts. I know many of the smaller districts have been reaching out to me saying, please don't forget us. So we are working on that. Go ahead, Irene.
Yeah, sorry. I would just add that it's not just Melissa. We're working with a team, and certainly our fiscal office, our chief financial officer too, to determine formulas and even just with the requirements of using ARPA funds. So it is a process. We know that there's not a lot of time, but we are working as a cross-divisional team to provide that information.
Thank you.
So Patrice, will you help us close?
Absolutely. I want to thank all of you for your participation, our attendees and our wonderful panel members, and a special thanks to Will Marie, our producer extraordinaire. And we hope that this has been helpful to those of you that participated. It will be archived on the CABE website, and we will make an effort to get back to those of you that your questions we did not have time to address this afternoon, and get you the information that will be helpful to you. So with that, on behalf of the CABE board and staff, I wish you a wonderful afternoon and hopefully a restful weekend. Thank you.